Welcome to Write the Damn Book Already. I'm Elizabeth Lyons, and I teach you how to write and publish powerful, thought-provoking nonfiction and memoir without overcomplicating it, overthinking it, or having to go off into no man's land for 3 months. Listen in each week to learn more and get your hands on all my great free book writing resources at elizabethlyons.com. Hi, everybody. Well, as per usual, this episode of Write the Damn Book Already was so fun. It always amazes me. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've become more brief. I've practiced brevity in the last, couple of years. If you've been around for a bit, you may be familiar with a podcast I had previously called Authors, Creators, and Visionaries. It still exists, by the way. But those episodes ended up being pretty long, usually on the hour side. And while I love getting lost in a podcast episode to the degree that I don't realize I've been listening for an hour, it's sometimes hard to do. So because I enjoy listening to shorter podcasts, I decided to start recording shorter podcasts. And I try to keep everything when I interview someone to 30 minutes or less. When it's just me, I try to keep it to 15 to 20 minutes at most. But I try to keep the interviews at 30 minutes or less, which is never easy. It's just never easy. I have so many questions I want to ask. And inevitably, as the conversation goes on, I'm developing more questions in my mind. And that could not have been more true during this interview with the fantastic Zibby Owens. I poured through her book, Bookends, her first book, which is just released within the last, I would say, 6 weeks. And I just couldn't stop. I just kept turning pages and turning pages and turning pages. And I was so struck with how honest and open she was, and also how much she stuck to her guns, her feelings, her belief, her conviction that there were certain things that she wasn't going to share. I'm always telling my clients that just because you're writing a book does not mean that you owe anyone an explanation of everything or anything. What you decide to share is for you to decide to share. And I think that it's a beautiful thing when you recognize that that's okay, and when you hold space to let other people have their opinion about that, and then you just go tell the story. And there was so much beauty and so many incredible insights in this book. I was underlining and dog-earing as I do. My books are just, I swear, they become destroyed. And I think that's the mark of an incredible book. When a book is destroyed, it's an incredible book. So I love talking to Zibby about her journey to this book, how it took some twists and turns, because you know what? They always do. People just don't always talk about them. But I love to talk to the people who will talk about them. And also her experience in the publishing space, running now Zibby Books, her publishing company, and her experience as a parent trying to juggle all this stuff. So she does it beautifully. You'd never know that there was even a moment truly where she was even feeling frazzled, but it was so much fun. So let's get to it, and I give you my interview with Zibby Owens. One of the parts of the journey that I loved reading about is that you had submitted it to, and I want you to tell the story because I don't want to botch it, but you had submitted it via your agent to a house more as fiction, right? And then they didn't like a part of the story. You refer to it as revisionist history. They felt like it was too soon after 9/11 to tell this true story, and they wanted you to make it different. So what you're talking about is the first time that I tried to write a book, which was after business school. I graduated in 2003, and in 2001, on 9/11, I had lost my best friend who worked in the North Tower, and I had been writing about that in the school newspaper and all the time since then, because writing is how I process my feelings. And over the course of that next year, I lost 4 other people who were very close to me, and it was just kind of a wreck of a time. And I decided that instead of going back to advertising and brand planning and marketing like I had thought, I was going to try to find something that if I did it at my desk and I died at my desk the way that I believed my friend Stacy had, I would be bringing my whole soul to what I was doing, which now I am doing. But back then I was marketing Pepperidge Farm cookies, which was super fun, but was not me. Like anybody could have done what I was doing. And so I didn't feel like that made
my life really worth living all that much? So I decided to take a year off. That sounded dire. I didn't mean I was like considering not living. I just
I get
felt
it.
hopeless a little bit. So I took a year off to write a book. I wrote many versions of it, like start to finish. First, I compiled sort of all my emails and source documents and tried to make that into a memoir. It wasn't totally a memoir. Then I scratched that, actually wrote a memoir, scratched that, wrote a novel with a different characters and everything. And then I rewrote that one time. So when I went to sell it with an agent, it was the novel, it was the fictionalized version with different characters and some different subplots and everything. But it did take place over 9/11, and it was at Harvard Business School, which is where I was. And I got a bunch of rejections from publishers, some of whom said it was too soon after 9/11 to write a novel about the events that had just happened. And I wasn't at that point prepared to write a memoir and sell it about my private life. I just wasn't in a place where I felt comfortable doing that. And they said, one publisher rather said, why don't you change it so you lose your friend in a car crash, because the parts about friendship are really strong. And I was like, well, that defeats the whole purpose of the book. It was just, so I put it aside. And I went on to do many other things over many years. And I resurrected that section in part when I was finally writing this, having sold it and having gone through several other rejections along the way when I tried to sell this on proposal. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah. Which I think that's the part of people's stories that I love so much, is the backstory behind the reality. Because people see a book come out, a product to come out, an app come out, whatever it is, and they sort of just, I think we all just sort of assume, I don't know if it's because it's wishful thinking or what, but that like you got this idea for Bookends yesterday, and then you wrote it overnight, and then it came out today, and you're all on the news and CNN and Good Morning LA, and all these things are happening. And it was just, and I put air quotes, so easy for you. And so then on the other side, people go, well, why is this so hard for me?
Oh my gosh, no.
Mm-hmm.
It was so hard for me. I didn't think it was ever going to happen. I wanted it so badly. And I was almost ashamed to say how badly I wanted it, because I couldn't even quite put my finger on why it was so important to me. But it just was. And every day I was interviewing authors for Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, which taught me so much and has improved my writing and my life immeasurably. But after I would get all these rejections, I would then come back and I'd be sitting next to somebody else thinking like, well, but I can do this. Like, I can do this too. Like, what is wrong with me? And and maybe this is foolish or hubris or whatever, but it didn't make me think I was not a good writer. Like, I know I have confidence in my writing. I know what type of writer I am. I am not a beautiful literary writer. I've tried that and I can do it, but it's like faking it and it's not particularly good. Like, I write in my voice and that's the best that I can do. It's like I can take what's in my soul and throw it on the page, and it often connects with other people who feel the same things. But I just was like, why can I not achieve this? Why can I not do this? And I had many crying fits. Like, I just literally, I would hear all these stories from all these famous authors. Like, I was rejected 29 times. And I was like, great, I was rejected 29 times, but I also didn't ever get accepted anywhere. So my story's not quite as wonderful as yours. Like, great. Yeah, I'm in that rejection. But when you're in a million rejections, you don't know if you're ever going to get an acceptance. And so you're not like, I'm on the road to acceptance. You're like, I'm on the road to imminent failure. And like, it's terrible.
Yeah. And I think it feels, when you can tell the story in hindsight, like, for example, Dr. Seuss or whomever, or J.K. Rowling, and it can be like, I got 273 rejections. But then when you're not at the but then yet, all you have is, I've been rejected 49 times. So what was it for you? Was it just like stalwart determination, or would you kind of peter out and say, I'm not going to do this, but then you felt a resurgence? Or?
Yeah, I had a bit of moping after each setback, but then I just stood back up again, because I've had this single-minded focus on it for a long time, and I have just felt this compulsion that I need my story out there, that parts of the story will help other people. I need to get it out there, and there's a purpose to it all. And maybe that's ridiculous, but my conviction in that has made me not quit. So every time I thought, well, forget it, I'm just not going to do it. Eventually I was like, well, no, I'm going to do it because this is what I'm doing. And I'm like, it's like, what else am I going to do? What other big giant goals am I working towards? Like, no, this is what I'm working towards. But now it's out, and it's been crazy because it's been so long. And now people are like, oh, is this a lot of work? Marketing this book. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, what was a lot of work and what is like, I have now a full-time job that I've created, which is running this publishing company I started, and my podcast network and my podcast, which I do 7 times a week. Like, that's my fault. I have to fit this in. And this is the gravy. This is like the bonus session. It's amazing. I'm not complaining at all.
I love it. And, you mentioned there will be one piece that someone will connect with. And I connected with a lot, but one thing that stood out to me, you are the only other person I know who's read Cutting for Stone.
What?
Yes.
I loved that.
I lost my mind.
Really?
So
that's crazy.
I know. And I thought I was the only, so I read it. My youngest daughter is from Ethiopia. So that's kind of where it came from, I think. And I don't remember even how I heard about it, but I believe it was through another adoptive parent. And I read it and just thought, this is on so many levels, like one of the most incredibly beautiful books I've ever read. And so I would recommend it to other people, or they would ask, what are you reading? Or what do you recommend? And I'd say, have you read Cutting for Stone? And they're like, I've never heard of it. You are the only, so when that was in the book, I was like, oh my gosh, somebody else has read Cutting for Stone.
Wow.
It's such a remarkable book.
Yeah. Not only that, but I remember when I was reading it and I think I wrote this in the book, but now I can't remember, but I had this conversation with my dad for like advice, whatever, and I was taking notes in the back of it. And then I always knew where those notes were because I put it back on my bookshelf, like the secret compartment.
Oh.
And then I realized that was stupid because anyone could find them. So then I ripped them out, and now I have no idea where the notes are. Now I've lost them. So I should have kept them in the book.
Yeah. Well, and you're funny because like at the beginning, so here's your book. Like we have notes and I do the same thing. And I actually was asking the other day, people, are you a yes, I'll write in books person? Because when I was very little, my grandmother gave me a book, and it was a very small book, and it was illustrated only. There were no words. So I think the idea was you make up the story as you go along, like you make up the words. Well, I thought as a 5-year-old, it would be cool to write the words in the book. Okay. And the amount of trouble I got in for that was incredible. So yeah. So I think like we have this, and now I write in like you're highlighted, dog-eared, underlined. All my books are.
I write in
everything, right? Yeah. But some people are like, no, it's a sacred. We don't do that, and neither is right or wrong. I'm just always curious.
I read.
Right.
I'm a writer in the books.
Let's write in all the books. And then I go back and I'm like, what does this mean? I wrote HBS by this quote I'm about to read. If it's okay, is it okay if I quote your something? I'm like, what is that? And then I thought, oh, it's Harvard Business School. So another thing I love about your story is if you look in from the outside, you'd be like, of course, this is easy for Zibby. She has an undergrad from Yale. She has a degree from Harvard Business School. She has the life that she's lived. She has all these things, of course. But you have this line that I underlined and it stopped me because you say on page 126, I was a receptionist with a failed book, 2 degrees, and probably an eating disorder. I was a professional disaster, and everyone I loved kept dying. And in that one sentence, Zibby, like, I laughed and I cried because the last part, and everyone I loved kept dying. It like rooted me in something, but I loved obviously it's your honesty. It dispels the thing that so many people are prone to think, because we're always looking for reasons why it's easier for someone else and why we can't do it. And so here you are, you've got all these things, and you're self-proclaimed at the time an eating disorder, all these.
Yeah, I was not.
Right.
I was like looking around at that point, being like, this is not going the way I thought it would.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're referring to is when, after business school, while I was writing this book, I got really into Weight Watchers. And for anyone who follows Gretchen Rubin, I am an obliger, which means I need external measures to like do anything. Like if I just tell myself to do something, well, not work wise, but for my own. Anyway, I loved the external structure of Weight Watchers, and I got so into it that I like overdid it and became first a receptionist and then a leader, and I was weighing people in, and I was just like, had so drank the Kool-Aid on that. For like 7 straight years, I counted and wrote down everything I put in my mouth, which is really crazy. Yeah. Although I know many people do that. But anyway, so there I was weighing people in and like running into people from business school, and it was just it was a tough time. It was a tough time.
It's like what, where, but it's so honest, and I think so many people can resonate with that, because we imagine ourselves doing a certain thing, and this is how it's going to play out, and then it doesn't, and we don't know what to do with that or what it means, and so we make it mean something that it doesn't mean, and it becomes a whole thing. I'm super curious about the structure of the book and how you decided on this, because it really does span in many ways your whole life. And so you have this unique way, that bookends, you take it through with the B and the O and the O and the years, right? How did you decide on the structure of this?
It came at the last minute, to be honest.
Really?
It came there. So I wanted to do a lot of short chapters, because that's one thing that keeps me going when I'm tired and I'm reading short chapters that really capture my attention. So one thing I set out to do is short chapters. I write in terms of scenes. So I had this list of scenes that I wanted to include, and I just saw them play out in my brain and then like kind of transcribed them and then linked them together. I then thought it made the most sense to group it chronologically. Even though there were so many parts, I was just like, well, this is a part and this is a part. I don't even know why I did that. It just made sense to me. And then I had all the parts and I had all the chapters. Then I went back and I named all the chapters after whatever was in the chapter. So I named it after a book that thematically represented the same thing. And then I had all my parts, and like right at the last minute, I was like, oh my gosh, look, I have the exact number of parts that spell bookends. So then I put the B-O-O, and I was like trying to explain it to my publisher. I'm like, no, you see, get it? Like B-O. Anyway, so I did that. And then after I had finished absolutely everything else, I went back and made sure that the beginning sentence and ending sentence of every chapter was like really, really strong, or as strong as I could make it. And that's what I did.
And I simultaneously love, and I won't use the word hate, but am cursing you right now because you recommended Annabelle Monaghan.
Nora Goes Off Script.
I cannot put it down, first of all. It's so good. And I think one of the reasons I can't put it down, although I won't know, but this is my argument at the moment, is that the chapters are they're not too short, but they're short enough that I keep going, okay, just one more. Okay, just one more.
Yep.
And yesterday, I'm 3/4 of the way through the book by just going, just one more. Just one more.
Yeah.
Before you know it, it's 2 a.m. So yeah, it's a amazing book, and I'm having so much fun reading it. Another thing that I love is, so tell me this, the book was due, and the book's due date and your twins' due date was the same?
Oh, so that was a book after my first memoir / novel, whatever. It was called Off Balance. After that didn't sell in 2004, the agent I had put me in touch and asked me if I would ghostwrite a book for 2 other authors, Paige Adams-Geller, who founded Paige Denim, and Ashley Borden, who is a celebrity fitness trainer. And so I wrote a book for them, and I had like 6 months or so to do it. And I wrote the whole thing while I was on bed rest. And they all knew when my due date was, and I knew when it was, obviously. And I was like, we've got to, keep going. So I did all the calls for that and wrote it basically in bed rest in my apartment the whole time.
Well, and I laughed because when people say, well, what's the worst, like when should I write a book or when shouldn't I write a book? My answer is typically there are 3 times that I would say definitely don't write a book. Beyond that, you're probably just procrastinating in some way. But one of those times is if you're expecting twins or quads or something like that. And granted, I was writing when I was expecting, I mean, when you're on bed rest, it's like, I was either knitting or writing, but that was me because that was my outlet, my cathartic outlet. So when I read that, I laughed because I thought, okay, here I am telling people when you're expecting twins, but in some cases, maybe it's the best time.
Oh, I was so glad to be distracted. I would have gone out of my mind.
Yeah, I know.
I did go out of my mind, but I
know.
really would have gone out of my mind.
Isn't that funny? Because you think your twins weren't your first, right?
They were
your first. Okay.
Yeah.
So mine were my second and third. Okay. And my daughter was not even 2. And so prior to being put on bed rest, I was like, somebody give me a reason, like order me to bed, write me a prescription and tell me. And then it happened. And I was like, this is the worst thing ever. I have got to get out of this bed. So it
was really tough.
Yeah.
It was really tough for a long time. I mean, now I sit for hours every day doing all this work and Zooms and everything. But until the last really year or 2, I still like to run around and move around a lot. But so to not be doing that was really tricky. I've gotten used to it. Now I'm like completely sedentary, but
I know, right? Sometimes I think, why are my knees so creaky? And then it's like, because I haven't stood up in 9 hours. That's why.
Pretty much.
The last thing I want to talk to you about is Zibby Books, because you've created this amazing new paradigm that's quite disruptive in a very, very good way. And I'm so fascinated by it because you've been in the traditional world. It's both, you kind of straddle both. And I'm not someone who says anything is bad. I don't believe any of the paradigms are bad. The challenge, and I've never been traditionally published. I've always done it myself. The challenge for me is that people have expectations of specifically the traditional world, that when it comes to advances, when it comes to marketing industry and things like that, that more often than not don't really pan out. So I love the way that you've created this new kind of collective approach to that. Where did that all come about? And
it really came about. I mean, let me preface this by saying that I never set out to start a publishing company. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to start a publishing company. Some days I don't want to run a publishing company, but I feel so strongly about the purpose and mission behind it and the fact that I need to be doing this, that I'm doing it. I had spoken to so many authors who had been on my podcast, both in the podcast and also becoming friendly with more people in the industry and just observing and seeing what the issues were. And then as my own book started coming out, again, seeing different issues from the writer side of things. And it just seemed to me that there was a void in having a house that was really all about the authors. And I know that sounds ridiculous because it's always about the books, but there's a difference between having it be about the books and having it be about the authors and the readers too. So I wanted to change that and put the authors at the center of everything. And there are things I did tactically and strategically to show that, but that is the heart and soul of it. So we do things like profit sharing, and we do things like community Zooms and trying new things like brand partnerships and ambassador programs. And we have all these things, and we're always trying something new. And I'm always coming up with different ideas and stuff. But regardless of what of those many things end up taking off or working the best or whatever, there is a culture that we've created that I think authors really want to be a part of, because we acknowledge how special they are, because we believe it, and we're collaborative. And, I get it. At the beginning, I'm like, we're going to involve you in every single decision. And now when things are like going, it's a startup, it's craziness. So I don't know. I'm hoping once everything gets settled, like we're still in our gearing up phase, like the printing hasn't begun. So but it's still been a lot of work. But I'm really proud of what we're doing. I'm proud of all we've acquired, and I feel this strong allegiance to these authors.
Yeah.
Our latest acquisition we announced today by Swan Huntley about a book called I Want You More, which is so good. And I was so afraid we wouldn't get it because we can't bid like traditional publishers. You know, our advances are modest and we're a startup, but we keep getting these books because I think people just want to work with us, and that's really special. And I'm putting together this like A+ team. And it's taking a while, but it's, you know, it's really amazing. So yeah, I just feel really lucky. And whenever my enthusiasm wanes or I start feeling discouraged, I read another book. Like I read one on the plane yesterday and I was like, oh my God, this is why I do this. This is why I do all of it. It's because I got a chance to read this book in this format and acquire this book and help this author and like be a part of her journey. It's really, really exciting.
That makes me so happy. I think that's the most wonderful part of all of it is that you see the authors feel seen because you see them. Yeah. So they don't feel seen just because the book is doing well or just until the sales start to plateau. It's like it's a partnership.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that authors have been craving for a very long time. Yeah. And also the opportunity to learn how to create relationship with their readers beyond just, hey, would you like to give me $13.95?
Right.
But like that real connection, especially post-pandemic, to have an opportunity. I mean, I'm an introvert until the day is done, and I value connection now more than ever. So I worry about my extroverted friends out there because they really are craving the connection back. But yeah, I think that's so wonderful. I love too to hear you say that there are days when you're like, this is work.
Oh, it's hard. It's way harder than I thought. I mean, I'm definitely of the mindset of saying yes and figuring it out later, but it's a lot. It's definitely a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm in it. And I'm happy to be in it. I really am. I feel very privileged to get to read all these great submissions, see what's out there, meet all these agents. Like, it's just so neat. I learn every day.
Yeah. Well, I am thank you for taking time out of your craziness to chat. What's the best place for people to connect with you?
Probably on Instagram at Zibby Owens, or on my website, zibbyowens.com, or bookendsmemoir.com if you want to hear more about the book.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you'd take just 2 seconds, that's seriously all it takes, to review, subscribe, or even share this episode with someone that you dearly love so I can help more people get their damn books written already. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon.